one of the things, and I've done a lot of work on this in my life, and a lot of the papers that I've published in scholarly journals are about this intersection between eating disorders, substance use disorders, and even addiction like eating patterns. Really necessitates a level of nuance to parse out the differences, to look at the similarities. Where do these concepts converge? Where do they diverge? One of the things that I've found to be important, not the end all be all of this conversation, is to really look at the temporal sequence of disorder onset, to look at someone's timeline. How did these things play out over time?
My name is Fana Asfa, and after doing the backbreaking work to save and reclaim my own life, my passion now is to help others do the same. Since writing my debut book, Sober Daughter, the amount of people that wanted more inspired me to create this podcast. This space is for both real people and industry professionals to share inspiring experiences and usable tools for us all to connect and heal ourselves together. In today's episode, we'll be discussing nutrition and recovery and the intersection of nutrition and mental health with Dr. David Wiss. Stay tuned to the end for some really helpful tips to take with you. Our guest today is Dr. David Wiss, a registered dietitian nutritionist and PhD who founded Nutrition and Recovery, a group practice of RDNs specializing in treating eating and substance use disorders. Wiss is also a scientific author, a nutrition and health consultant, recovery coach, and a passionate educator. He's also created Wise Mind Nutrition, a revolutionary app that you can download after this episode. Hi, David. How are you doing?
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to chat with you and build some energy together.
I know. I'm so excited. I've been wanting to do this for so long. And, you've been a pillar in the nutrition and treatment world for years. And I'm so glad to have you with us. And, we know it's a fact that folks who come in seeking help for substance abuse and mental health disorders need help learning about self care and nutrition, which for me is why I focus so heavily on self care and creating a holistic recovery life in my practice. So I'm so glad to have you here to talk about the importance of nutrition, the overall components of our health. But first, I want to talk about something other people might not know, which is what led you to your healing journey? What did that look like? How did you know
Aha.
you needed to change? And what brought you there? How did you get to where you are now in your recovery?
I can definitely admit that I hit some pretty low spots in my early 20s. It
Yeah.
definitely got pretty dark for me, and I had significant health challenges, obviously mental health issues, but I think for me, physical health and mental health were very intertwined.
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time, but my substance use and abuse and my sleep patterns and my very poor nutritional habits all contributed to where I ended up, which is in a place of unsafety, crises, criminal justice system involvement. I mean, you name it, things really took a turn. And I had no idea how deeply connected all those different areas of my life were. I thought it was normal to have a Mountain Dew for breakfast.
Yeah.
It was normal for me. I thought it was normal to eat once a day through a drive-through,
Yeah.
right? And so it all seemed like normative behavior to me. And the truth is it was. And then I got a chance to start my life over and consider different things, to take different approaches. And nutrition was one of them. I started my life over and I stopped using alcohol and drugs. That was
Yeah.
big. That was
Yeah.
the foundation. And I got into nutrition, exercise, sunlight, sleep, supplements. And I
Mhm.
was one of those people that had a rapid transformation in my health, like noticeable rapid transformation, the kind that everyone was like, yo, who are you?
Right.
What happened? Right? What's going on with you? And like, what did you do? Can you help me?
Yeah.
Right. And I was, in a position to say, yeah, I'll show you. Like, let's work out together. Let's go to Whole Foods together. And I just started sharing what I had learned because that's what recovery taught me.
Mm.
Recovery taught me to share the message of hope. And I was always really interested in carrying the message of hope and recovery. And I started carrying it around nutrition. and around wellness, and it was well received.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it led me to, finishing my undergrad, going back to school. I had to start at community college again, and
Mhm.
then going to a master's program to study nutrition. I did a master's thesis in nutrition and substance abuse, and I created Nutrition and Recovery over 10 years ago now, and built a practice which turned into a group practice to bring nutrition education and counseling to mental health treatment centers. And that was a huge success. And eventually realized I wanted to do more and sought out additional academic training. And I got into UCLA to do my
Mhm.
doctorate in public health with a minor in health psychology, and really integrate biological, psychological, and social sciences all together.
It's so wild to me. I mean, one is the ways our life can shift so drastically if, we start listening to, what our passions are, what our purpose is. And also you explaining, just the full downward spiral of what it looks like when we really let go of all of our health. If you're only in that space, you're not noticing that, you maybe haven't eaten for a couple days, or when you do, it's only this like horrible junk food and it's continuous for years
Mhm.
for a lot of people. And that has immense impact. And so I just thought, I've been around when you've brought your groups in and worked with clients in treatment, and it's so powerful and also palpable for the client seeing, like, oh, wow, I've never even thought about what am I doing in my body? What am I eating? What is, happening here? And that growth of people who they're not just physically sober, they're now healing from all parts is huge.
Nutrition is really tricky because there's so much nuance needed, and it's super complex, right? Like, to add more to my story, and I don't always share this, but feel inclined to share it today. There was probably a part of me that, even though I wasn't healthy, liked the way I felt because
Mhm.
I didn't have a lot of appetite, right? I felt thin, and I
Yes.
remember liking that at the time, right? And thinking like, wow, I'm doing good. So when we talk about nutrition in mental and behavioral health context, we have to bring in the conversations around body image and sense of self and tendency for extremes, and be very mindful that people can take well-intentioned information and then take it too far,
And
right?
that part,
So
that part.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's super, super complicated. It's not just a matter of, oh, we need to talk about wellness and self-care. It's like, we need to be mindful that some people are going to overdo wellness and self-care at the compromise of some other area of life, right? And so
absolutely.
it just necessitates a level of skill and experience and awareness in order to move into a space like a residential treatment center or an IOP and carry a message of nutrition and health.
Yeah. As you hit it right on the head, it's that extreme, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I remember when I was really bad and I would keep getting compliments
That's
on
right.
how I looked in
That's right.
my sickest moments.
That's right.
And so we have this societal pressure also that says, oh, you're not eating, you look great. Oh, you're thinner, that's great. When that has nothing to do with what's going on internally in our health. Because I was the most unhealthy I'd been, but it was affirmed.
You
And
fit
so
into the outfit. You fit into that one outfit,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
you're dying inside, but you look great. And,
Right.
and so I love that you bring that. And, can you explain a little bit of how, the connection comes between eating disorders and substance abuse for a lot of people? Because
Yeah.
for a lot of us, and women and men, they come in and they are really conjoined. And
Mhm.
so, what's that correlation?
Yeah, the overlap is somewhere around 50%, possibly higher,
Yeah,
right? So you certainly do find people that have eating disorders that don't experience substance related issues, and people that have, addictions that don't have food and body related, psychopathology. But the majority of people tend to cluster and co-occur with those two things, right? Particularly binge type eating disorders, right? That are associated with loss of control, because those are key defining characteristics of substance use disorders. One of the things, and I've done a lot of work on this in my life, and a lot of the papers that I've published in scholarly journals are about this intersection between eating disorders, substance use disorders, and even addiction like eating patterns, right? What we call ultra processed food addiction. Super controversial stuff, but really, really necessitates a level of nuance to parse out the differences, to look at the similarities. Where do these concepts converge? Where do they diverge?
Mhm.
And, one of the things that I've found to be important, not the end all be all of this conversation, is to really look at the temporal sequence of disorder onset, to look at someone's timeline. How did these things play out over time? In other words, if someone was dieting when they were 13, maybe their mom taught them how to diet and they were losing weight early on, and then it later on turned into stimulant use and a substance use
Mhm.
disorder. That might be a different presentation than the person who never had any food or body dissatisfaction or otherwise disordered eating that had a lot of substance issues. And then when they got sober, they started gaining weight and learning
Right.
how to, started dieting and being more concerned about that. And I'm not saying that the treatment is going to vary significantly, but
Mhm.
I've always found it really important to really look at the timeline of one's life, right? Like when did, trauma timeline, developmental processes, first diets, addictions, recovery,
Yeah.
right? And it really does create this overall picture of what's going on with someone, and you could figure out what are the more important things to address and treat.
Mhm.
But the biggest area of contention and controversy is that traditionally, and I say traditionally because this is changing,
Yeah.
most addiction or substance use disorder models are based on abstinence, and like kind of pull people into what some people would consider rigid approaches to recovery, like moving something out of my life entirely, which, I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of
I'm a
abstinence-based
fan.
approaches. Okay, I'm gonna just say that. But in the eating disorder world, the message has traditionally, and again, this is changing, has been only about moderation and inclusivity.
Yeah.
So a lot of people feel kind of confused because, on one hand, you're being told to do none of this and to be black and white about alcohol and drugs. And then the contemporary eating disorder model says, but don't worry, be inclusive here, work toward learning how to eat this in moderation. And so there's a lot of complications with people that have co-occurring eating and substance use disorders,
Yeah.
because it's hard to be black and white in one area of your life and very gray in another. So, that's a big part of the work that I do, is help people look at their own degrees of cognitive rigidity versus cognitive
Yeah.
fluidity,
Yeah.
right? And be able to see, like, how can you move through these different things? How much of this is in your mind? How much of it's actually embedded into your neurobiology,
Mhm.
right? And helping people understand the need to always think in nuance rather than move through life with absolute rules around food and body.
Oh, I love it. I just love it because it's so important. I mean, what you talk about is like individualized care and really getting to, the root of, what transpired and the timelines, because if we look at it, none of us existed and come into treatment from a bubble. We have a cultural aspect, we have a family dynamic, we have all these stories and timelines that come into play. And I think you being able to navigate the nuances and less rigidity of that approach is really beneficial for the person coming in, because we don't all fit the same mold. We really don't.
And I feel blessed. I feel blessed to have been able to get advanced training, right?
Mhm.
To be able to get a PhD from UCLA and study science at a really deep level,
Yeah.
to be able to understand the differences in groups and how, some people naturally lump all people into a category and say, all people with eating disorders are this and need this, right? This is what eating disorders represent. Whereas someone like me, not only do I want to parse them into, the different diagnostic categories, anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, other. In each of those categories, I'm slicing and dicing it down into different subtypes, right? And
Yeah.
thinking about, heterogeneity and differences, because as a practitioner, someone who works one-on-one with people, I don't want to provide just easily scalable universal treatments to people. I want to give people really clear things to consider based on their own bio individuality and their own lived experience. But I'm blessed because I get to do scientific writing and think about these things. But I'm always careful not to be critical of the early career folks who, don't have the advanced training. They went to, like, got trained from a manual, and they're
Mhm.
now just trying to do the best they can, learning how to help people, right? And lumping everyone into one category. Whereas, advanced practitioners, we learn how to split them up and look for the nuance.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think what, people on the other side can take away that are actually seeking this support is to ask for a little bit more, individualized, catered care
Yes.
as much as possible. And then we get into, this huge disparity of that access to that kind of care. And so that's one of the reasons I love being able to share these things on, this open platform, because we don't all have the same access. And, being able to step into places and advocate for yourself and say, hey, what does it look like for me? Like,
Hmm.
how do I fit this into my life, into my needs, into what's showing up for me? And I think that's really such a good takeaway for people, is to know that they can ask those questions
Hmm.
and they can advocate for, what specifically is going to help me. And that's a question that gets lost a lot.
And if there's like this energy of there's one way, this is the way, join or kick rocks, that might be a sign of like, whoa, whoa, maybe this isn't the right group or the right provider for me. There are 12-step groups that force everyone to fit into a mold. And maybe if you don't fit into that mold, maybe that's not the best fit. There's
Oh, let's talk. Oh, recovery too. See, it's rigidity. It branches into so many areas of, healing world, and are taking care of ourselves in these spaces. And we are all starting to ask for more fluidity. We are asking for inclusivity. We are asking for a little bit less of this rigid, if you don't understand or you don't ascribe, you're out.
Mhm.
And I really love that more and more people are starting to see, how can I deserve to be here and get this help, and how can it help me specifically?
And this is quite an advanced topic in recovery. And I'm so glad we're starting to go there.
Huh?
What I've learned about myself is, I'm separated for 17 plus years. My last drink was industrial hand sanitizer inside of a
Mhm.
correctional facility. Okay. Like,
Okay.
I'm separated a long time, but it's only in the last few years that like my heart's been able to crack open and my mind's been able to crack open. And maybe having a daughter has something to do with it.
Mhm.
Maybe getting a PhD had something to do with it. Maybe just the changing energy in the world and all the false dichotomies and all the conflict that's out there in the different arenas has made some things abundantly obvious to me. That certainly has a part to do with it. But I also like to be honest and defend the rigidity and say, I don't think I would have gotten sober in 2006 if it wasn't for some level of rigid commitment to that way of life. I think like and that's why I always sometimes caution newcomers when I share or lead a workshop that like, this is like evolved thinking. And that
Mhm.
like when I was new, I needed like rigid buy-in. That's just me. I got to be honest. I don't think that like this very nuanced kind of sort of maybe would have resonated with me. I really did need, this is clear cut. It has to be this way because I don't know if I would have done it.
Yeah.
Right. So I also want to say to our listeners, if you are new to the recovery journey and you're experiencing what feels like cognitive rigidity, that you can evolve that over time
Mhm.
and let your brain do what your brain does.
Yeah.
and don't try to reject the neurobiology that exists. Just stay open to the possibility that you can move toward more fluidity over time, and you don't necessarily need to force it. You just want to keep an open mind and an open heart and let it happen to you rather than by you.
Ah, yes, yes. And then you said such an important part that, the rigidity in the beginning, and then we're talking about recovery, you guys. So in recovery, there is so much value to creating a solid foundation that is built on a lot of bottom lines and a lot of sacrifice and a lot of, you know, repetition actually of this kind of rigid, like I'm building this recovery space.
Mm.
And that is really helpful for a lot of people. So the fluidity we're talking about is once you have this foundation, being able to now evolve and move in, a lighter and a more curious way. And I think we get that because we build a really strong foundation. And I think what the contention we were talking about is that solid foundation sometimes for some people never gets explored.
That's right. That's right. They
Yeah,
stay locked into a rigid
yeah,
mindset that was helpful in the beginning and
right.
now becomes hurtful later on, right?
Yeah. Oh, I so agree. And I think that's the beauty of recovery is we get to evolve and grow and learn, and it gives us these, beautiful guidelines to do that in a safe way. And I mean, that's incredible to me, but
We have
it's
to.
different strokes for different folks.
Yeah. And again, like it's easy to, be critical of people that found a certain rigid recovery path and didn't really change or evolve, right? And like we're stuck. And I've certainly found myself, criticizing that and wanting people to evolve. But then I also remember that alcoholism, alcohol use disorder, addictions, sometimes, those are conditions that have, statistically poor outcomes, right? Low probability of, high quality of life, just looking at population data. And
Yeah.
so, I've concluded that for a lot of people, it might be better to kind of stay,
Hmm.
in something that has worked and not take risks,
Yeah.
right? And to stay on a singular path if that feels right. And there's other people that get the call, to do something different, to learn, to start reading other books
Yeah.
and to start having other meditation practices. And I
Yeah.
guess what I want to say there is, listen to the call. Remember who you are and listen to the call if you get it. You know what I mean? To do what you want to do, pursue what you want to pursue, learn what you want to learn, and be who you want to be.
So true. Yes. So for people that are identifying and, they're either starting their recovery journey or they're starting to look at, disordered eating or looking for help and support, what is, your first and foremost advice for them? And then kind of what would you suggest as a path for them to start looking at healing this, because it is a lot of people have shared, and being in the treatment world myself, is that eating disorders are one of the most hidden and the most filled with secrecy, because there's a
Hmm.
lot of control and shame, and it's so normalized,
Hmm.
right? So how do we help these people if they're starting to notice, you know this might be a problem?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is that it's super unfortunate that our system as a whole doesn't really support nutrition as a primary intervention in
Right.
mental health. Insurance doesn't cover a lot of the work that I do. It's possible to get some coverage for specific types of eating disorders for very short periods of time. And I could go on for days about, my field and the conflicts of interest and my profession as being marginalized and maybe some of the reasons why, looking at big food corporations and big
Right.
pharma and a lot of the behind the scenes corporate interests that make it very difficult for people to utilize nutrition as part of their recovery.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of people are sort of forced to kind of work within the system, right? And to see like, well, what does the system support, right? We have psychiatry and therapy, group therapy, right? But there isn't always a lane for wellness, nutrition, et cetera. And, there's a growing number of treatment facilities that say, even if insurance doesn't pay for this, we like this
We
and
like
we
this
want
or we'll
this. We
offer it.
believe in this, right?
Yes, yes.
And, it's a big part of the advocacy work that I've done, giving presentations all over the years and saying, hey, this is a thing. Here's the evidence. Check it out. There's data here, right?
Mhm.
But there's a lot of people that have to go outside of the system
Yes.
to find, the best healing and recovery work for themselves, which is unfortunate that it usually only caters access to the more socially advantaged groups, right? You were talking about access earlier, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
what can someone do is like, you know, build a team, build a team of excellent providers who know about food and body stuff. And then when you say build a team, you're talking about, well, does insurance cover it? It's like, if it doesn't, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Completely unaffordable stuff. Sounds good, Dr. Wist. Thanks. Yeah, there are people like myself that work really closely with individuals
Mhm.
on not just nutrition, but food and body using trauma informed approaches and lifestyle medicine to look at the entire dimension of physical wellness, right? Sunlight, sleep, exercise, supplements,
Mhm.
really kind of creating that timeline and thinking about how can we move the lever, what are realistic ways that we can move into a new chapter and have it be sustainable and have it not feel like something that could fail, what some people call diet culture energy, having
Oh,
it
let's
feel
talk about that.
safe, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Mhm.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that have experienced harm working with wellness people and nutritionists, et cetera,
Yeah.
because it lacks that eating disorder informed perspective. You know what I mean? And there's also people that have been harmed by practitioners who have too much of an eating disorder informed perspective. They're on one extreme or the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to elucidate that more for people, there's going to be people that, really want to make some changes, and maybe a diet focused practitioner will give them too many rules,
Mhm.
and they'll feel like they learned some sort of rigid rule from someone and they never forgot it, and they're like, this nutritionist taught me, and it felt very pass fail. They tried to do something that
Yeah.
they couldn't stick to, and then they
Mhm. Mhm.
binge ate and they felt like they failed and they never went back, right? So that's
Yeah.
an extreme example of a sort of diet culture feeling type of an intervention, right? But on the other hand, there could be people that have real problematic eating, that have addiction like eating, compulsive eating,
Yeah.
night eating, binge eating, and
Which
go
is
to a
a huge thing with especially substance abuse. It's huge.
huge.
Yeah.
And they could go to an eating disorder practitioner who's on the complete other side of the spectrum. And they just tell them, there's nothing wrong with the food, just practice moderation, be
Mhm.
intuitive, stop dieting, and accept your body, and you'll be okay. And then someone's like, you don't understand me.
You don't know what's happening at night. You
You
don't
don't know what's going
see
on,
this. You don't see this. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so we have these extremes, diet culture versus non-diet culture. And it seems like the field has been split to where,
Mhm.
people are being pulled into one camp or the other, and people are looking for evidence that you're either with us or against us. And it's created a lot of tension to where
Yeah.
people feel confused about who to work with.
Mhm.
And a lot of the nutritionists have, built little taglines or sayings like, I am this type of a practitioner, I am this type of a practitioner, and do so that there is a group identity that's formed, which
Mhm.
I think is helpful. But it's still, like, in my experience working with people over the years, they call me and they're like, well, what kind of nutritionist are you?
Yeah.
Are you an eating? Do you do intuitive eating, or do you do this? And I'm like, sweetie, I do all of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? I'm not in a single box. I
Yeah.
bring in modalities from different ways of thinking and I blend it all together so that people can truly get individualized care.
Yeah. It's just so impressive, what you do and being able to spot the extremes and help people, find a little bit more of the gray area where they can actually sustain
Mhm.
and thrive, because I think all of us have heard that messaging, that don't do this, don't eat this, don't go there, don't do this. And especially somebody who's going through substance abuse, that's like a flashing red light of,
Right.
I want to hit the hot button, I want to hit the button.
That's
I
right.
hit the button, oh no, I'm shame spiraling, and now I'm gonna, go back 2, 3 weeks of, work.
That's right.
And so it's what I think hope people take away is, again, asking questions, asking providers, do they offer support? Is there individualized care? Can we
Mhm.
talk about how this is specifically affecting me? What can be sustainable for me moving forward?
Mhm.
I really hope people learn that we have to advocate in this day and age. And it's so important that we get to see, there's a space that we can be in where we can thrive.
And a great question to ask a provider is, do you believe ultra processed food addiction exists? And if so, what are your thoughts on it? What does it mean? And what does one do about it? Because it might split the extremes up really quickly.
Yeah.
Because,
Okay.
there's going to be people that say, no, that doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. And they're over here on this extreme. And then other people will say, yeah, absolutely. Everyone has a food addiction. Sugar's addictive, right? Everyone needs to get off of sugar, right? And you can really sense. But when a provider says, yeah, there's definitely science there, right? There's something to be thought about, right? And can start to talk about these things in a both and rather than either or fashion, you
That
realize,
part.
yes,
That
you're talking
part.
to an intelligent person who has dialectical ways of thinking and isn't committed to pulling you down their own road or converting you into their own camp.
Oh my God. That was it right there. I hope that is huge. The both and we can live and thrive in the both and
Yes.
the either or. I mean, as speaking from experience, I remember being early in, I mean, I've shared with everybody and in my book that I was in treatment. I was a client who turned into, the practitioner on the other side. And I remember learning about food, and I remember my first thoughts were, how can I make this really rigid and really extreme
Mm.
so I can feel, super in control?
Hmm.
And that just exploded in my face. And so now I'm so against the idea of putting labels. I've stopped eating certain things, but I don't want to be labeled a necessary
There you go.
type, right?
There
I
you
want
go.
to focus and shift on healthy ways that feel good for my body and me, but there might be moments when it's not. But it's that rigidity, and I think that's where the ism thrives.
I do too.
And
Yeah, I feel so fortunate in my own journey with food, having, like I said, being a rigid-minded person early
Mhm.
on in those first years of recovery and benefiting from it. And then like allowing the time to pass, right? To be able to really just move into a graceful way of living life and feeling that in the kitchen and on the plate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Feeling like there's no eggshells, there's no shoe that's gonna drop, right? There's no rule that can be failed. Food is joy, food is celebration, it's nutrition. And when I look at food, I don't see calories or grams of macronutrients. I see colors and phytochemicals, and I see minerals that, most people don't see because they don't have that kind of training. But I just see nutrition when I look at real food, and I'm like, wow, I'm so impressed. And I want my gut bacteria wants that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then just bringing that real positive spin to nutrition is a big part of the work that I do. And I always remind people you can't make peace with food unless you make peace with body. So the body
Mm.
image work is a really big part of that as well. And it's healing work.
It
It's
is.
healing work.
It's healing work. And I love that you're here with us and talking about this, because my entire journey and hope for people is that we start looking at it as this holistic way, so we feel whole,
Hmm.
not compartmentalized and too heavy on ourselves, because healing is a forever game, right?
Forever game.
And
I
the
love that.
more the more we get curious and see, what areas feel good, what areas need some attention and love, and that might be nutrition for a lot of people, and it's
Hmm.
something I hope that they get inspired to get a little curious about after today.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people associate the need for nutrition when there is an eating disorder
Yeah.
or medical complications or very severe gut issues. But increasingly, we're spreading awareness about the role of nutrition in depression,
Hmm.
anxiety, trauma, ADHD,
Yeah.
substance use disorders. And that conversation is relatively new, not super popular here in the US Western medicine industrial complex, um,
Yes.
but is picking up steam and traction because we have randomized controlled trials to show that, nutrition interventions can improve depressive symptoms. There's a handful of them. There's
Yeah.
longitudinal studies that are starting to paint these pictures. So I've really tried to crack open the minds of people and say nutrition isn't just about eating disorders and gut health. Nutrition is about overall brain health, and
Hmm.
not just to quote unquote use a diet to treat a mental health disorder, but the whole way we think about food, all of our cognitive processes, the gut brain axis, the context of our eating. It's all loaded with stuff to unpack in sessions. And so that's what prompted me to build the Wise Mind Nutrition app, which
There
I
we
spent the
go.
last 2 years of my life doing. I brought all my clinical experience and expertise into a program that's designed to transform and educate people to be their own eaters, to build their own nutritional identity, to think in nuanced ways, to be dialectical, to not fall down cognitive traps from diet culture or from anti diet culture, right? It's a super powerful process that kind of mimics going through, weekly sessions with me over 6 months. So
Hmm.
there's an assessment process where we learn about people's mental health scores based on some screening tools, and then give some personalized nutrition recommendations. There's daily videos, meditations, cooking instructions, handouts, recipes. It's
Huge.
a huge process. And, I originally started building it as this, super expensive sort of masterclass of like getting, this experience of working virtually. And as I ended up building it into a native, iOS and Android apps, I realized that this thing has the potential to reach a lot of people.
Yes.
And my training is in public health. My PhD is in community health sciences. So when you were talking about access earlier,
Mhm.
it always, especially with respect to nutrition and insurance and the amount of people that have contacted me over the years. And when I told them that I don't take insurance and I told them what my prices were, they said, there's nothing in the world I'd rather do than work with you. I just can't afford it at this time. Right.
Right.
And
Right.
so I packaged it into an app and basically made it no cost, low cost, just removed all the financial barriers.
Yeah.
I made an incredibly robust free version of it. So people could set intentions, log their food, do a nightly review, watch videos, share their data with their friends or providers, all free. And
Right.
the actual subscription version of the app comes after you've been playing with it for a while and you say, you know what, I love these videos. I want to watch more of them.
Hmm.
And people could go through the program in just 2 months about. And we priced it at $29.99 a month. So someone could get the entire journey of Wise Mind Nutrition for less than the cost of 10 minutes of therapy. You know what I mean?
Hey,
Yes.
that's what I'm talking about. You know,
Yes.
it is so, so, so amazing of you to, you know, put together all this work and offer it to people in a way that's accessible, in a way that's,
Mhm.
you've removed so many barriers. And That is just such a huge passion of mine, is taking what's being given and offered in these, very exclusive, sometimes elitist spaces, right? Because treatment can be a wide ranging of things. And for us to be able to take what's being offered and offer it to people that need it, no matter where you are or your circumstances,
Yes.
because nutrition is such a huge part of a holistic recovery lifestyle. And, the more we get to live this kind of healing life, we want healing foods, we want our body healing, we want to
Mhm.
feel present and alert, and all of that connects with, right, what we're putting in our body. And
And
amazing.
another piece of mental health, as you know, is social connection and love.
Yeah.
And, not everyone loves, app-based programs and tech, right? We're moving in that direction, whether you like it or not, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what we're doing, right? So a big part of, what I worked on, in the last few months of this year to finalize the app was the connect feature where people could share their
Oh,
nightly
yeah.
reviews with other people and choose what data to share, whether you want to share the food, the nightly reviews, the workbook, the assignments, and then building in messaging features, chat features, right? So I follow all my private practice clients on the Wise Mind Nutrition app and get to see their journals at the end of the day and look over
That's
their food
amazing.
and give them little feedback and send a message of positive reinforcement. And I'm actually in the process of starting to log some of my food in the app so people
Mm.
can follow me back and get some inspiration for eating food for mood and brain health. And so the Wise Mind Nutrition app isn't just a solo adventure. It is filled with opportunities to build community. It's all completely anonymous, by the way. You can't see what other people are doing,
Nice.
and you have to accept requests, and you can really remove people at any time. But it does create a sense of I'm doing work here and getting some views, right? Which helps people
Oh, it's
stay
helped
engaged.
so much. Oh my God, I can't wait for mine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super exciting times. And
So
the
good.
coolest part about the app is that after working through all the modules and doing the assignments and finishing the first cycle of the program, we check in again with the mental health
Mm.
scores, and
Yeah.
someone could see how the mental health may have
Yes.
improved over time. So the popular apps like MyFitnessPal, the data is like showing you what's your body weight and how many calories did you eat and what's your percent body fat and all that. And like, that's cool. A lot of people like that, but there's a lot of people in the world that information is just not appropriate for,
Mm-hmm.
or
And
don't want to
triggering.
turn nutrition into a
A
vain,
numbers game.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Wise Mind Nutrition is reporting back on mental health rather than uh, vanity metrics. We're doing sanity metrics.
Yeah. Oh, there
There
you go. We're gonna wrap it up right there. That was
you go. Okay.
Oh my God. Well, David, thank you so much for being with us. Obviously, you are a wealth of knowledge, experience, and hope. And I'm just so glad that you were here to share the information that people really need right now.
Mhm.
And I'm happy to be here and that, you're out in the world helping people. So if anyone wants to connect with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, the private practice website is nutritioninrecovery.com.
Okay.
The app is wisemindnutrition.com. There's a homepage there that has like over 80 blogs now, and you can sign up for the app there and for the newsletter. Wise Mind Nutrition is on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. I have a personal Instagram at Dr. David Wiss, and I'm pretty much everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually have a video to throw on most platforms most days. So constantly keeping the conversation going at the intersection of nutrition and mental health, and certainly looking for people to engage and exchange with.
Love it. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on today's episode of Sober Daughter Podcast. Check back next week. We will have another incredible guest sharing inspiring experiences, expertise, and usable tools for us all to heal and empower ourselves together. To connect with us or ask a question for a future episode, follow us on Instagram at The Sober Daughter, and you can connect to me directly at Fauna Asphalt. So thank you all for joining us. And again, remember to keep doing the good work.